I never thought I'd tell this story publicly, because even saying it out loud feels like pulling something dark back into the present. But maybe sharing it will lift the weight off me, or at least let others know that what happened to me wasn't just in my head. A few years ago, I rented a beach house on the coast of North Carolina. It was one of those long, weather-beaten houses you see standing on stilts above the sand, with peeling white paint, wide porches, and windows that looked endlessly out at the Atlantic. It wasn't luxurious, but it had that rustic charm that made you feel like you could disconnect from the world. Just you and the ocean. I rented it for 3 weeks. I wanted solitude. At the time, I was going through a messy breakup and thought a quiet retreat by the ocean would give me space to clear my head. When I first saw the listing, the price seemed almost too good to be true. The owner barely spoke when I called. His voice was flat, distant, as though he didn't really want to rent it out. But when I sent the deposit, he gave me the keys and said only one thing before hanging up. Don't stay out on the dunes after dark. I laughed it off as local superstition. But that sentence never left me. The first day, everything felt perfect. I arrived just before sunset, the sky painted in strokes of orange and purple as waves crashed rhythmically in the distance. The house creaked with every step I took. But that was to be expected for something so old and close to the sea. Inside, it smelled faintly of salt water and mildew, but nothing unbearable. There were seashells lined up on the windowsills, faded photographs of families I didn't know hanging crookedly on the walls, and furniture that looked like it had been there for decades. It had a kind of frozen-in-time quality, like the place had seen generations pass through but hadn't changed itself. That night, I sat on the porch listening to the waves. The moon cast silver light across the ocean and the wind was gentle. For a moment, I actually felt peace. But then I noticed something. Down on the beach, near the edge of the dunes, I thought I saw movement. A figure. Dark, slender, standing unnaturally still, just beyond the line where the beach met the shadows of the grass. I blinked, leaned forward, but the figure was gone. I told myself it was nothing. My imagination, adjusting to the solitude. I locked the doors and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easy. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of footsteps. Not outside, inside. Slow, deliberate, dragging footsteps across the wooden floor of the hallway. I froze. My mind raced. Had someone broken in? I held my breath, straining my ears. The steps grew louder, closer, stopping just outside my bedroom door. I sat up, heart pounding. But then, silence. Absolute silence. When I finally worked up the courage to open the door, the hallway was empty. The only sound was the whisper of the ocean through the cracked window. I walked through the entire house, checked the doors, the windows. Everything was locked tight. There was no one there. The next day, I brushed it off as the old house settling, maybe the wind pushing through cracks. But deep down, I didn't believe that. On the second night, the dreams began. I dreamt of drowning. Not in the ocean, but inside the house. Water filled the rooms, dark and cold, rising fast while I gasped for air. I dreamt of shadows moving beneath the surface, hands reaching up from the depths, pulling me down. When I woke up, gasping and soaked in sweat, the sheets smelled faintly of seawater. I told myself it was impossible. But the smell lingered. By the third night, things escalated. I was sitting in the living room, lights dimmed, listening to the wind rattle the shutters. That's when I heard it again. Footsteps. But this time, they weren't in the hallway. They were above me, on the second floor. The problem was, the house didn't have a second floor. The footsteps moved across the ceiling, deliberate and heavy, as though someone was pacing directly above me. I sat frozen, staring upward, my skin prickling with every sound. Then, they stopped, right over where I sat. And then came the whisper. A faint, breathy voice, so close it felt like it was brushing against my ear. Get out! I leapt from the chair, spinning around, but no one was there. My chest tightened, my stomach dropped. I wanted to leave right then, pack my bag and drive until the house was nothing but a speck in the rearview mirror. But some strange force kept me rooted, a mix of fear and fascination. That night, I barely slept. And when I did drift off, the dreams were worse. I saw the figure from the dunes, but closer now. Its face was pale, blurred, like water-damaged film. Its eyes were black voids, and its mouth gaped open as though it was screaming, but no sound came out. The next morning I decided to explore the dunes despite the warning. I walked along the sand, the tall grass brushing against my legs. The further I went, the more uneasy I felt. The air grew colder, heavier, and then I found something. Half buried in the sand was an old photograph. The edges were water-damaged, the image faded, but I could still make it out. A family standing in front of the very beach house I was staying in. A man, a woman, and a little girl holding a seashell. Their faces were oddly blurred, like they'd been smeared by water. I took the photo back with me, but the moment I set it on the counter, the entire house seemed to groan. The windows rattled, the floorboards creaked, and I swear I heard the faint sound of a child's laughter coming from somewhere deep within the walls. That evening, the atmosphere shifted completely. The peaceful rhythm of the waves no longer felt calming. It felt mocking, like the ocean was laughing at me. The shadows inside the house grew darker, deeper, stretching unnaturally along the walls. And as the sun sank, I felt a presence settle over me, heavy and suffocating. The night that followed was pure hell. It began with the sound of water dripping, slow, steady. I followed it to the kitchen, where I found seawater pooling on the floor, seeping from the cracks between the tiles. The smell of salt was overwhelming. I grabbed a towel, tried to mop it up, but the water kept coming. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The reflection in the window, behind me. A tall, dark figure stood just beyond the doorway, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. My breath caught in my throat as I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty, but the reflection had been there. I know it. I stumbled back into the living room, heart pounding. That's when the lights began to flicker. And in those brief moments of darkness, I saw things. Faces staring at me from the corners. A pale hand gripping the railing of the staircase that led nowhere. The little girl from the photograph, standing silently by the window, her dress dripping with seawater. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My body locked up as I watched her slowly turn her head toward me. Her eyes were empty, lifeless, but her mouth twisted into a wide, unnatural smile. And then, in a voice so distorted it didn't sound human, she whispered, "The ocean never gives back what it takes." The house shook violently, pictures crashing from the walls, furniture sliding across the floor. I bolted for the door, yanking it open, but the moment I stepped outside, I froze. The dunes. They weren't empty anymore. Dozens of figures stood there in the moonlight. Dark, motionless, all facing the house. Their shapes flickered, like heat rising off sand, but colder, sharper. And as the wind howled, they all took one step forward. I slammed the door shut, chest heaving, and pressed my back against it. The house felt alive, groaning, pulsing, as though the walls themselves were breathing. I sprinted to the bedroom, grabbed my bag, and didn't even bother packing. I just ran. I ran through the house, out the back door, across the porch, down the creaking steps, and into the night. The figures on the dunes didn't follow, but I swear I could feel their eyes on me the entire time I drove away, headlights cutting through the dark, the ocean roaring behind me. I never went back for my deposit, never spoke to the owner again. When I tried calling him once, weeks later, the number had been disconnected. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it, the sound of footsteps, slow and dragging, moving across a